The best way to survive a nuclear explosion is to be above it. For example, on a plane. But why? Because most warheads will explode at an altitude of about a mile, so that the shockwave doesn't lose power on the way to the ground. And at an altitude of 8 miles, the shockwave will hardly reach the airplane. The passengers will be shaken at most. That's why the presidents of Russia and the US have air posts. Airborne command posts, or doomsday planes. Yes, there are such things. You probably didn't know it, but the US president is always followed by a doomsday plane wherever he flies, just in case of a nuclear emergency. The American Boeing E-4 and Russian IL-80 are protected from any radiation of a nuclear blast and stuffed with tons of equipment to control the rest of the army from the air. There's even an antenna several miles long, which is unwound for communication with the submarines. Such a plane can fly for several days without landing if refueled in the air. Okay, presidents will burrow or fly away, but what should mere mortals do? How will we even know about the threat? Alas, we'll know about the attack just 10 or 15 minutes before the explosions. Yes, the time is limited. Why? Because the missiles fly for about 30 minutes, more or less. They have to be detected, and then track the route, and then give all the orders. It would take from 10 to 15 minutes for our military. After that, you'll hear the emergency alert signal or the civil defense siren from the street speakers, and even from traffic police cars like this. National TV channels, radio, and street screens will provide the exact instructions on what to do, but I can tell you even now, you have to look for an underground shelter without hesitation. A subway station deeper than 20 yards can sustain a wave and violent underground tremors from an air blast nuclear explosion. The station contains a forest of batteries for emergency power and filters for air since it'll be taken from the outside through a shaft. The other ways to the outside world will be blocked by the heavy hermetic door. What if there's no subway nearby? No worries, here's Plan B. Many civil defense shelters were built in the 20th century. Think Soviets. Though few people know their location. They're harder to find on maps than the nuclear silos. Besides, lots of shelters have been abandoned or turned into warehouses or parking lots. If there's no shelter nearby, it also may happen, that is, the shelter is far away, then don't waste your time. Get into the nearest basement or underground parking lot. See the numbers? The basements of multi-story buildings have larger numbers, which means better protection from radiation and shockwaves. Why is that? Because the more layers of concrete, the less dangerous gamma radiation they transmit. Basements are followed by rooms on the middle floors, away from windows. But all these shelters will be useless if the nuke explodes too close to you. Assume that the most common Minuteman missile warhead explodes in the sky right above the center of Moscow. The warhead has a yield of 350 kilotons, in other words, 350,000 tons of TNT. For comparison, this is 15,000 tons of TNT, which is 23 times less. Oh, and let me remind you, the warheads will explode at a height of several hundred yards so that the shockwave will reach the buildings and the people on the ground. First, a fireball up to a mile wide will burst into the air and cool from 100 million degrees to 6,000 degrees in 1 second, releasing energy with light, heat, and radiation. Right below it, everything that can ignite on the ground will burn instantly, and even at a distance of 5 miles, the light will leave deep burns on the skin. Following that, the shockwave will flatten all buildings and superficial shelters within a radius of about a mile, but the farther away from the center, the weaker it is. And people in this ring would have a great chance of surviving in basements and shelters. Here you can survive a shockwave even in your own bathroom. The buildings will resist, but the glass will fly like shrapnel from a grenade, and there will be a significant shuffling in the apartments. It would still end up with more than 500,000 dead and 1.5 million wounded. And that's just one warhead. A very difficult time awaits all those who survive and manage to leave the city. After all, war not only breaks civilizations, but also the climate. It seems that hundreds of warheads will heat up our planet. But in fact, the heat will last only as long as the cities and forests burn. And then, it'll get colder. In fact, millions of tons of soot and smoke will fill the air and block out the sun, thereby blocking out the heat. If the conflict is localized, for example, India and Pakistan detonate 50 bombs each with Hiroshima-like power, then only 5 to 6 million tons of black smoke would erupt. Such a scenario is called nuclear autumn. The temperature on the planet would drop by a few degrees, but that would be enough to starve 2 billion people due to severe crop failure. Shitty but bearable. It'll be a total disaster if Russia confronts America. 150 million tons of smoke will go up, and noon will turn to dusk. The air will cool by 15 or 20 degrees. That's the theory. People would have to forget about bread and agriculture for a decade, because nothing grows in such conditions, not even at the equator. This scenario is called a nuclear winter. Everyone will suffer from it. Buddhists who don't tolerate violence, Papuans who have never even heard of nuclear weapons, socialists and capitalists, the rich and the poor, all share the same fate. Left without food and heat, humanity will never see the first spring sun. Countries can no longer abandon all nuclear weapons. We're hooked on this crap. Yeah, that's the paradox. Nuclear weapons terrify us, but they also bring us peace. Over 70 years after the creation of nuclear weapons, the number of deaths in wars has been reduced by 95%. That's decent. So should we fear nuclear war? We are much better protected against false nuclear alarms than we were in 1983. The ground radars scan everything that appears in space within 4,000 miles, even if it's the size of a soccer ball. What about the satellites? They're new. Both Russians and Americans have smarter satellites. They can detect the target of an enemy missile. Also, they automatically exchange data with radars and will cancel the alert if they don't receive confirmation. One more reassurance to you. A nuclear war won't start all of a sudden. Before it, countries are likely to argue even worse than they did during the Cold War. And you'll find that out on the news. Who am I kidding? We'll find that out from memes, no doubt. Yeah, but I want to warn you. As soon as all the memes about it are no longer funny, it's time to buy canned goods and get out of the cities. Therefore, you can sleep soundly. As for politicians, our team has one thing to say: make love, not war. Twice a week is great. After all, threatening with warheads in every dispute is exactly the same as standing waist deep in gasoline and boasting about the matches you have.